I'm proud to introduce Sedgwick County Commissioner Karl Peterjohn.
I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out today, and hopefully I'll work out this mic. I don't want to stay too close to the lectern, but with Pachyderm Club members, good Republicans, and Lonnie and Daniel, I'm absolutely honored and privileged that each and every one of you came out today and gave me the opportunity to comment. I've got the advantage. Last week, and I think most of you were here, for the few who weren't, County Manager Scholes came and spoke to us, and I'm not going to repeat the achievements and the report that he provided. I would just second what he said and point out that Sedgwick County made an incredible transition. Personnel is often policy, and having a situation where we bring in a man who had been used to managing 7,000 people from 31 nations, chief of staff, top level officer for the NATO command in what had been Yugoslavia, and bringing him to Sedgwick County is a remarkable achievement. And the transition we've made, and we had some great people helping in that. Former Assistant County Manager Ron Holt, I'd mentioned him. There have been others too. We are in a remarkable situation, folks, because not only do we have a county manager who had over 25 years of experience, but we had a county attorney who represented the commission and handling legal matters. It's like running a medium-sized law firm. He had over 30 years of experience. Rich Hewson retired, and replacing them, and we brought in Judge Eric Yost. I mean, a just absolutely fabulous addition with the people that he has selected to work with us. So I'm going to try and keep this relatively short so that we can get in a lot of questions in the time that I have here to go over. I've got a sheet here with over 30 accomplishments from the last 8 years, and the formal title is Sedgwick County Past, Present, and Future. And I'd be willing to walk through as much of the past as you want. It's just been an incredibly huge honor and privilege to be a Sedgwick County Commissioner during the last 8 years. And John was kind enough to mention the upcoming event that we have of January 4th after the commission meeting. Tentative time's 10:30. I hope that works out. We'll see how long the agenda is. If it doesn't work out quite then, go call my 4 colleagues, or soon to be former colleagues, and sort that out. But I'd like to begin. Many of you know I'm, as an economist, a fan of Frédéric Bastiat, the great French economist from the 19th century, who came up with saying, look at the seen and unseen on issues. And I'd like to mention some unseen, just one or two that didn't get mentioned that occurred during my time frame. We had a major challenge, and former Commissioner Parks played a significant role in this too, when we moved the county's communication system, which we'd had problems with on the analog basis, to digital. The price tag that had been presented to us could range from $22 to $25 million if we went with the main company that did these most of the time. And from county staff did a great job. We put this out for bid. Company that could do this, they were new kids, they wanted the business. We managed to make the analog to digital conversion. Price tag was $10.5 million. I mean, that is real savings that cannot be overlooked. Now, jail overcrowding, that's been mentioned, and I've mentioned it in the past. I'm not going to go through more details with it, except to say we added a mental health pod that has significantly improved the operation of that jail, both for the inmates and the people who are being detained, because many of them haven't been adjudicated, so they're awaiting trial. They haven't been tried. And we've just opened earlier this year a new community crisis center, 635 North Main, that will provide a invaluable tool for folks who are struggling in our community that sometimes get enmeshed with the criminal justice system. And I had been on the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council for many years that go into it. Now, some of you may say, hey, Karl, you seem kind of upbeat and excited. I am. This is a great time to be an American. It's a great time to be a Kansan, and it's a great time to be a resident of Sedgwick County. 8 years ago on election night, and I was elected, and I've joked about the fact that that on election night there'd been a very vigorous campaign. Groups, the labor unions, the Wichita Chamber of Commerce, the Wichita Eagle had all come together, but despite that, I got elected anyway. And they said, Karl, you seem to be so down. Why are you down? And you just won. I said, yeah, I won. But we've just returned Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. Harry Reid's retained as Majority Leader. And we've just elected a community organizer who started his political career in the living room of a domestic terrorist, Bill Ayers, and has been tied to a variety of Marxists and political wackadoodles from the left as our President of the United States. Wouldn't you be a little bit down too? Now, thank goodness that's not the case we have today. But a lot of folks thought the roof was going to fall off the courthouse the day I took the oath of office. And of course, they have to wait 2 years later till Commissioner Ranzaw joined me. But I made a comment at the time, and I want to talk just briefly about my colleagues, because I had said, we're going to disagree on issues, and I'm going to do my darndest not to be disagreeable in the process. And I've had the privilege of working with commissioners from both parties, former commissioners, not only Commissioner Parks, but former Commissioner Welsheimer. Privilege of serving with all the commissioners today, Norton, Unruh, and my dear close friends, Commissioners Jim Howell and Richard Ranzaw, who was, Richard, thank you for that wonderful introduction. But, I've been through so many battles. I'm going to talk for a minute just about people say, hey, do you have some regrets? And I'm going to say, I'm going to mention a failure. Often elected officials, we'll try and repackage it, and there's this whole art of what they call spinning. But my inability to generate momentum towards eliminating the county's property tax and getting the legislation through at the state level, getting the community support that would make that possible, and eliminating the county's mill levy, giving this community a huge comparative advantage, be able to make that happen. It hasn't occurred. It should have occurred. Would be a huge opportunity in the future. Our economy is going to be on a rebound. The boot heel of Washington is coming off the neck of industry in general and the corporate aviation industry that's important to this community in particular. And I think it's long overdue. I would point out that we face a variety of challenges that continue, and I have often used the phrase keeping this community safe at as reasonable a cost as possible. And I strongly believe the challenges of the U.S. Constitution and the Kansas Constitution to protect our country and our community from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And we face the challenges. Are we going to be a country not only of rule of law, of a constitution, but a bottom-up country where IDs can work their way up, if people can exercise economic freedom and political freedom? Or are we going to be a top-down place where the so-called best and brightest make their rulings, and we will have, sometimes called crony capitalism, or I would call it statism, with the power. I've had a reputation for opposing tax hikes when I came on the commission. Government spends a lot of money, and there's too much spending, and we need principled pro-economic freedom leadership within our business community. And sadly, I think it's been lacking. I've had a lot of people say, well, the reason you lost is, you had all the business groups in this community, builders, realtors, the Chamber of Commerce, all opposed you this time. Well, that's true. And they jumped in a big way. The Wichita Chamber did 4 attack mailings in the space of 10 days between, I think the last one came out around July 31st, a couple days before the primary. But we cannot have an environment and a growing economy where special benefits to special people, and we can call them, whether it's a TIF district, which, by the way, I'm proud of the fact that the TIF subsidy districts for property taxes, I opposed every TIF district that came before the county commission. But we have these also for sales tax now. They don't come before the county. Whether we have, and you can, whatever crony capitalism tool that becomes available, this is hurting our economy. It's hurting economic freedom. It's hurting opportunities for the next generation. It's hurting people, and particularly the low-income and minority communities that need to be able to grab that bottom rung of the economic ladder to be able to pull themselves up. Now, I want to talk about media opposition. It was interesting. I started to work on this presentation and started to talk about problems with media bias, and I ran into so much material. I don't literally have enough time to go into all of it. But I look at the zoo issue. July 14th, the Sedgwick County Republican Party held a forum for candidates, and we had a discussion on the county spending, and it turned out there was really no substantive difference between the 2 candidates in terms of the current level of spending. There was a reporter in the room at the time. I said, man, that's newsworthy. We were fortunate enough, and thanks to the help of some of the folks in this room, we managed to get this up on our campaign website. And I figured, well, there'd be news coverage. Well, I also thought there'd been news coverage back in 2012 where I'd had an opponent who said he supported consolidation of all law enforcement under the Wichita police chief. That story never got reported either. And so we have bias by omission, which is one of the biggest problems. And as a former reporter, I mean, I'm going to admit to it. Richard was kind enough not to throw it out, but I spent about 1.5 years as a reporter for a small paper in northeastern Ohio before I moved to Kansas, the Painesville Telegraph, and it's since been merged, and it's now the Lake County Herald. If anyone wants to try and dig out dig that out, but I'm concerned as an American and looking forward to some of the challenges, and I'm going to drift a little bit here from strictly talking about county issues, but some things I've seen. We've talked about the sanctity of the electoral process. I think Kansas does an outstanding job under trying to make sure that we have voter identification so everybody gets a chance to vote who's a citizen. Everybody who's a citizen gets to vote. And it's a privilege to be a citizen. And all too often, what does the privilege of citizenship mean? If basically, well, I crossed the river and I'm here, or I got off the airplane and I'm here. Give me stuff. When we talk about the huddled masses yearning to breathe free, we're not talking about the masses hoping to live for free. But when it comes to elections, I want to, we've had this whole controversy about recounts and the Green Party. I'm going to throw out, in 1960, we had an election that in many ways was even closer, and you had 2 states that voted for the Democrat candidate, Illinois and Texas, where Texas had such a bad reputation at that time, and landslide Lyndon Johnson, who was the vice presidential candidate that year, he picked up that nickname when he was elected to the U.S. Senate with 184 votes margin. He'd actually been behind on election night, but the ballot boxes kept coming in from certain places in the state, and albeit it was a Democrat Party primary, but back in 1948 when he was elected to the U.S. Senate, election, you won the Democrat primary and you were, in for all intents and purposes, elected. But in Illinois in 1960, part of the reason Cook County has such a dubious reputation, or the city of Chicago, was tied to the voter fraud that existed. And it's interesting, I've seen news reports now that the city of Detroit, when they were doing the recount because of the Green Party effort, they've discovered they've got precincts where more votes were counted than people voted. I mean, this is incredible. We've joked about, John likes to joke about the Keachai cemetery vote coming in. Well, it's a joke here in Sedgwick County. In other places in our country, it's not a joke. But we need elections, and the U.S. Supreme Court's even agreed. Interesting, this decision goes back a few years, but included at least one liberal on the court who said, yes, voter ID, that's, they're saying, well, this is voter repression to basically show an ID. Have you ever tried to get in the White House these days as a citizen? Social Security number, voter ID, I'm sorry, not voter ID, that's a driver's license, maybe a passport. Our challenges are immense, but at the county level, interestingly enough, we've been pulling our debt down. Now that can be turned around, and we can borrow money and spend it. I'd like to see if we can hold it down or try and make our local economy more competitive with lower property taxes. We do have a property tax problem. Property taxes as whole in Kansas, across all 105 counties, are a good deal higher than our surrounding states. It's a major economic disadvantage, comparative disadvantage for businesses that look at, should I come to Kansas or should I go to a state where it's required that before you raise city, county, school district, any special districts, state taxes, you've got to get voter approval. Now, Richard was kind enough to point out the fact that we've worked hard to make the new requirement of voter approval work at the city and county level. It needs, and the best argument that's been made against that, by the way, they'll say, well, the legislature did that and they put it on cities and counties, but they didn't put it on themselves. The state doesn't require that. And my answer to that is, yes, they should put it on the state and all the governmental functions, not just on cities and counties. But are we better off today by having it on cities and counties than not? That's a no. There's no question about that voter empowerment to allow you, the citizens, actually it makes the elected officials' job easier, in my opinion, because it requires us to put together a package of saying, okay, if we think we need more money for something, if you'll approve tax X, we'll give you A, B, and C. You have accountability. You have community involvement. That's the way it used to work going back to the original New England Town Hall concept. And the further we've moved away from that, the weaker we get. I'm concerned going forward. I saw that Michael Moore wants to disrupt the inauguration. That reminds me of the 1973 effort to do the same. It's a bad situation, but I find it frustrating that we are in a situation where the effort to resurrect the worst part of the 1960s seems to be the political platform of the left in this country in general, and a significant part of the other major political party in the United States, the Democrats, because we have, I can make the argument the cup's half empty or the cup's half full. For instance, we have low unemployment, official numbers, but we have record low labor force participation rates. I see signs popping up, help wanted. What's wrong with our economy that these signs are out there and people aren't coming in to get those positions? The official government numbers say there's no inflation. How many here believe that? Anybody? The numbers are as fake as the news. Well, maybe there's a connection there. Looking at it more broadly, I mean, as a Christian and a person who wants folks to, try and exercise their freedom and live the American dream. It upsets me when I see the genocide, the ethnic cleansing that's going on against Jews and Christians in this world, and the fact that we gave $150 billion to a country that refers to us as the great Satan and refers to Israel as a little Satan. That is an abomination. Now, pulling it back locally, I think we are extremely fortunate, and there are other places in the country that have not been as fortunate, but there's a war going on against cops, against law enforcement, and public safety in general. And that's, interestingly enough, it's not just here, it's going on overseas too. There are places where in France and in England and in Sweden, they say public safety people can't go safely. They're kind of no-go zones. I don't think we need that here in the United States. What we need is to strengthen our public safety, and I would point out during the last 8 years we've done a number of steps to do so. I'll go into that in more detail if anybody wants me to. And I would point out the fact that, with the new Trump administration coming in and his cabinet, and there are a couple people in the cabinet I don't know and I have some concerns about, but a lot of the people on the cabinet I do know. This is one of the best cabinets that I have seen, and some of you may have heard, I had an interesting public discussion on that recently with a fella where we were on different sides of that, and Mr. Levin and I will have to just agree to disagree. I'm going to go in to talking a little bit about the challenge, especially for the younger people here. If you're older than me, and I'll be 67 early next year, this may not be quite as important for you, but for the younger people here, not only it is important to continue to work and grab your piece of the political pie, whether it's as a precinct person, whether it is helping in a campaign, whether it is donating money, however you contribute, please do so, because we started at a huge competitive disadvantage. I want to praise Newt Gingrich, and the strongest point of his presidential campaign in 2012 was talking about the disreputable news media. And I look at, I'm at the point with the news that I think, gee, if we look at like the atrocity that occurred in Benghazi in 2011, I'd say, well, let's put the shoe on the other foot. How would the news media would covered this if it had been George W. Bush and Condi Rice had done what the President and our Secretary of State did on September 11th, 2012? We've got this ridiculous notion that the Russian hacking election meme or theme, meme seems to be the word du jour, but I think of it more of the theme. I see all this news coverage and they will not report the video of President Obama sitting next to the Prime Minister of Russia, Putin's right-hand man, Medvedev, and saying, well, after I get reelected, and I think this was in 2011 or 12, we'll be able to do some deals after I get out from under things. And they're saying, oh yeah, it's Trump. Trump's the one who is involved with Russian hacking. We've got the Clinton Foundation that gets money as part of the transaction that sold 25% of the American uranium interest to Russian firms. Now, who has the Russian ties? If we're going to bring up this Russian story, let's look at facts. Give me a break. I mean, the media wants to talk in narratives. We need facts, we need news, we don't need editorialists pretending to be news people. It's a fact that one of the New York Times new reporters had been one of the ones who'd written to Podesta saying, well, I'm a hack, here's my material, is it okay? I hope it passes your approval. I mean, and we think, well, that's national, that wouldn't happen in Kansas. Well, let me just mention, about 55, maybe 56% of the voters decided to leave a former school district attorney who is now the Chief Justice of our state Supreme Court, Lawton Nuss, we're leaving him in office. Here's a man who was disciplined for judicial misconduct for ex parte communications with litigants who were in front of his court, legislators who were involved in the school finance case, which, by the way, should a school district attorney be the one who's deciding school finance? I think there's pretty good grounds for recusal there if you have any judicial ethics. Well, Lawton Nuss was admonished. This occurred several years ago. Did any story in the Kansas press talk about him being judicially disciplined or mentioned admonished? Well, I think he should have been impeached and removed from office. And he's not the only school district attorney up there on the Kansas Supreme Court, too. Having said that, we have problems in terms of news media coverage. Mr. Salazar is kind enough to come here and take down my remarks. I sent him 10 points from and this is a minor issue, but it's one where I profoundly disagree with Mr. Wright over here, of allowing businesses to choose IPC code as well as UPC for plumbing codes. There were a whole number of points that were presented. We had plumbers who were taking Lonnie's position, plumbers who were 180 degrees opposed to Lonnie's position. The news coverage didn't reflect that fact, and I'd like to, before I open up for question, in terms of criticizing the press, I came across this where a University of Nebraska journalism professor, and I picked this up off of, trying to remember which conservative website I was on. His name's Matt Waite, and he talked about 2017, and he'd been in a whole bunch of meetings where all the bright journalistic thinkers are about how to restore trust in the media, how to reach middle America, how to tackle fake news. And he wrote, "You won't fix this, any of this. Not in 2017, not soon. You won't fix trust in the news because you won't fix how news gets made, because you won't fix how you hire senior leadership to diversify your thinking, because you won't fix what stories are selected, because you won't change who you hire to do the stories, because you won't fix the ways that stories are written to be more transparent and more directly sourced to give people a reason to trust you, because you won't fix the lack of training in newsrooms that could retrain reporters to source stories more explicitly, because you won't fix the content management systems to require sourcing on stories to be transparent and structured and visible, because you won't fix the technology leadership in the company, because you won't fix the thinking that makes you believe you're not a technology company, because you won't fix the belief that trust and fake news is Google and Facebook's problems and not yours, because you don't believe you're the problem. Wake me when you do." We have done some great things at Sedgwick County, and I am honored to have had the privilege of having the title commissioner and being one of 5. And let me just, and I don't know if I've said this publicly before, but I will say it here. I had a good friend who said, "Hey, I'm leaving the legislature, here are my law books." And I had a set of the Kansas statutes, and it included, the powers of the Register of Deeds, of the Kansas courts, of the county clerk. I looked through, and I was looking through for powers of a county commissioner. Well, sorry. That's a futile search. You can check me if you want, but there's no statute for the powers of a county commissioner. There are powers for the county commission, and they are significant. They are substantial. But it takes a majority. And part of the time I've had the privilege of being in the majority. I helped elect Commissioner Parks when he was chairman in 2009. I helped Commissioner Ranzaw and Commissioner Howell when they ran for chairman in 2015 and 16. I have I have to say, there have been some bad days as a county commissioner, but there have been an awful lot more good days. And we have challenges in front of us. I would close and open this up for questions with a comment from Churchill, and I may be paraphrasing him a little bit here. This is not an exact quote. He said, there are problems in this world, but the problems from winning can be just as difficult, even if they are more pleasant, than the problems of losing. And Sedgwick County is fortunate with the leadership going forward, with the all-Republican county commission that's going into office come January, that I think Sedgwick County is in great hands for going forward. I am optimistic that we are going to continue to provide quality leadership across the board, whether it's in public safety, in public services, accountability to taxpayers, transparency, trying to provide a strong, we've strengthened the county checkbook that had been open. There's more information available on county spending. We've had our problems, and I would be happy to discuss in details with it, but Sedgwick County, I believe, is in much better shape as I leave my term than it was when I began. And I appreciate each and every one, and my colleagues from the county who are here who aren't part of the commission. I thank them publicly too, because it's a team effort, and we've got a stronger team today than we ever had before. Thank you.
Questions for Karl? If you'll raise your hand, I'll come around and bring the microphone.
Karl, you offered to give us a little more detail on the fact that our law enforcement seems to have much better community relations than in many other communities. Would you give us a little more of that detail?
Well, I was specifically focused on the fact that I know Sheriff Easter and our new police chief here in the city of Wichita and other law enforcement across the county have been working on community outreach and community policing. But I would point out the fact also that we have worked, I think, and done an outstanding job of trying to resolve the jail overcrowding problem. And there were a variety of tools. Pretrial sentencing was one of them, scope. We've forced the idea, we've eliminated the free rider, free good problem that had existed, because basically the jail, there was no cost for municipal prisoners. We want to keep the dangerous people who are charged with serious crimes off the street. But if we've got people who are struggling with maybe personal problems, I mean, I'd much rather have a person who we've got to take care of, address the problem. Let's say somebody's got a DUI. If we put them in work release as opposed to in the jail, if they're in work release, they're out doing their job because they're employed, and they're serving the rest of their sentence inside the work release facility down here on Harry Street. But if we had them in jail, there's a good chance, okay, they will stop making their payments for their rent, for their car. They'll get behind on their child support. They'll be in a situation where their whole life can go down. And if we can get these people, and we've got drug court and mental health courts to try and help these people who have gotten involved with the criminal justice system, so that we can hopefully separate out the truly dangerous folks from the folks who are struggling with problems, and maybe we got some tools to help them. I've been to a number of the graduations for the drug court. These are open and available. I don't know how well they're publicized, but if you get a chance to attend, there's some very compelling and difficult personal stories that the participants will tell, and how long they've been, whether their problem was alcohol or some other, and in many cases it's illegal intoxicants. But we have, I want to take a look at public safety as a whole, Martin, because We've added EMS facilities. I hope that we're going to be able to, this is not going to occur on my watch, but there will be, we've got a new EMS station that's under construction right now, next to our fire station on near 55th Street South and Oliver. We've got, and there are plans being drawn up for ones out in the western part of the county, whether they satisfy Karl or not from the Cheney point of view. Stay tuned. I think the next county commissioner from District 3 will have a say on that, but I certainly hope he will. But keeping this community safe is very important, and we've come close. I'm glad that we are in a situation that, you know, our airport wasn't blown up. And I look at the atrocities that have occurred, whether they're in Orlando or whether they're in San Bernardino, Boston Marathon, as a former marathoner. I mean, you know, people, they say, well, only 3 people were killed. Well, what if you're one of the 3? And what if you're one of the 200 who lost your leg or legs? I mean, we live in challenging times.
Okay, back here with Lori.
Let's talk about the future. What's next for Karl Peterjohn? Is he going to start a conservative media outlet or something like that for us?
Well, let me put it this way. I have been in media in the past. I'm looking at opportunities, whether it's local or outside the local area, whether it's public or private, whether it's for-profit or not-for-profit. I'm keeping my options open. I am retiring from the Sedgwick County community, but I've just renewed my membership to Pachyderm Club, and if you haven't done it, get over there and sign back up. So I'm personally not retiring, except to, you know, many folks may not have remembered the old story about the phoenix. You go down in flames and burn up, but you come back stronger than ever. Well, that's my objective, but that's a secondary objective. My main objective that I've decided, and come January 8th, after I don't have my county obligations on me anymore, I'm going to have fun.
Karl, is your critique of Kansas media, would you say that's universal, or can you think of any exceptions to, no, that's not my real question. Do you think it is inevitable for somebody who pushes as hard against the status quo as you have to meet the kind of electoral and public relations challenges that you did?
That's an excellent question that is incredibly subjective. If I look back at it, or that there are things I could have done different and should have done different that would have not left me in the position I'm in today. Yeah, 20/20 hindsight. I did not, you know, I did not expect the business community. I mean, 4 mailers in 10-day time period. I mean, that's just incredible. But you know, it's not unprecedented for outside forces. I look at let me give just a little bit of context. I was checking a little bit and trying to get an idea. You know, how much money was spent by Governor Brownback in 2014 to get reelected? And I think his campaign spent about $5 million. I think there was an outside third-party group that reported about educational efforts to try and convince people the facts and not the big lie that was out there, our 21st century version of the big lie that, you know, education funding on K-12 at the state level had diminished. And even if you take out the CAPERS stuff, which CAPERS should be included in my opinion, I think the governor's race with the Republican Governors Association contribution, I think the total price tag was somewhere between $10 and $15 million. I mean, think about it. That's a heck of a lot of money per vote. And I was outspent. I've been outspent in every campaign I've been in. You can evaluate that as you see fit in terms of what it means. I've had support from an awful lot of folks, including an awful lot of people who are sitting here in this room, and for that I thank you. And if you run into any other folks who supporters of mine, thank them too. The important thing is I don't mind being beat for the right reasons, for the positions I've taken, for supporting the issues that I stand for. I think it's, you know, I have a wonderful sheet. If anybody wants it, it's called the 10 worst mistakes of winning candidates and the 10 worst mistakes of losing candidates. And it was put out I'm having a senior moment here, I'll think of it later, by a fellow out of Virginia who taught campaign schools. And the challenge that we face in this environment is you need to understand the new technology, build on the new technology. And even though I am an NCR retiree, that's a public fact, I did not, the tech world, my piece of the tech world has gone way past me, and I'm frankly struggling to do all the new stuff. I mean, my son comes home, it seems like there's a new thing every day, and I'm still trying to get past, I'm still trying to do Facebook, and I actually started Twitter and tweeting a little bit. That's an area where Donald Trump is way, way ahead of me, and maybe if I was better in that regard, the outcome might have been a little bit different.
Hey, Karl, is there any way the public can force the governments to stop spending? I know that they're moving to creative financing, so we can't limit their taxation, but because they call it something else and get revenue that way.
Well,
how can we stop them from
James,
spending? Because if they can spend, they just use a credit card.
Well, when I was up in Topeka early on, I had a conservative legislator said, look, Karl, if you can't keep the money from coming up here to Topeka, if it gets here, it's too late. It will be spent. And of course, in Washington, where you've got the Federal Reserve and their printing press, and you can create trillions of dollars out of thin air, the opportunity for expansive monetary policy, I think is what we call it, as opposed to a revenue enhancement, as opposed to whatever other euphemism you want to do for government dollars. No, I shouldn't say government dollars. It was dollars that the government has acquired for spending. So we've got a challenge.
Dr. John.
Hey, Karl. I know you have some issues related to the overlapping jurisdictions, and in what way would you like to see the city different? Say there were 4 Richards, Karls, and Jims on the city council. In what way would you like to see this city different? How have you been handcuffed because of how the city is behaved?
Well, we've got the challenge. Cities are very different from counties under state law. Cities have the power under the Kansas Constitution, Article 12, Section 5, called constitutional home rule. So they have the ability to opt out of what are called non-uniform state laws. And counties, while we also have home rule, it's much more limited. It is not constitutional, it is statutory. And this legislature, in their wisdom, has, I think, somewhere around, last time I checked with one of our attorneys, somewhere I think between 25 and 35 exceptions where a non-uniform state law counties may not opt out of. Now, that's the general legal overview. Now, in terms of your specifics, in terms of Wichita and Sedgwick County, there's going to be a natural tension between these bodies that I think is unavoidable, because if you get elected to city council or the mayor of Wichita, your constituency may overlap, and definitely will overlap with some of the commissioners, but it's a different constituency because my district, the 3rd district, at this point in time encompasses about half the square miles in Sedgwick County are in District 3. A majority of the bridges in this county, District 3. Almost half of the road miles in the county road system are in District 3. So my priorities as an elected official to represent my district are going to be different from, say, a city council member who's representing, let's say, East Wichita. And we've got to try and work together. And I've tried to be, disagree without being disagreeable with all elected officials, regardless of what level they are, whether they're township officials, whether they're legislators, whether they're members of federal office. It's a challenge, but I would give a lot of credit to Commissioner Howell, because the agreement that he managed to work out with the city this year, we broke, and Michael Scholes mentioned it last week, we broke the deadlock for the Law Enforcement Training Center that had been the highest priority for the sheriff and for the chief of police, and I think is a absolutely wonderful accomplishment. We're doing it for a lot less cost than was initially presented to me. The first plan that I heard about had a price tag of over $30 million. Is the price tag higher than I'd like? Well, I'm always trying to represent the taxpayer's interest, make us safe at as reasonable a cost as possible. But this law enforcement training center, which also gave, as part of the agreement, and I'll say a kind word about the mayor and the city council. They came to the table, negotiated. Excuse me here. They negotiated with the county, Chairman Howell, Pro Tem Chair Ranzaw, and we've got an agreement to be able to use their fire training facility. And the fire district's an important, but interestingly enough, completely legal separate entity from Sedgwick County. And being able to combine these, we're going to, in my view, have better public safety for the community, and we're doing it so at a price tag that is a lot better than what had initially been presented, but it's a sign of us working together. Now, if you've seen the media coverage, well, you'd think we're spending all day throwing spitballs across Central Avenue at each other. And there are disagreements. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I support voter empowerment. Our commission has voted 3-2 on it, requiring voter approval for raising property taxes. I think that's an imperative. The Kansas League of Municipalities and the Kansas Association of Counties, much to their discredit, is spending your tax dollars to lobby against that provision right now. And the City of Wichita is in full support, from what I've seen of their platform, of the League of Kansas Municipalities' position opposing voter empowerment for raising property taxes. I think that's wrong. But we can disagree on it. I'd be happy to debate any one of the city council, if John Squared want to invite me back to debate the merits and demerits of voter approval of taxes, hey, I'm game. If I think it ought, and like I said, we need to apply it to all the other local government bodies in the state. And frankly, I think it's one area where I wish the U.S. Constitution had a provision for it, although they quite frankly saw that wasn't practical and in a 18th century environment, and so it wasn't included.
John has the last question.
It strikes me that the county commission has stood as a check, perhaps, maybe checks and balances against some of the spending programs that actually give away county as well as school district spending, tax revenues, and compliment you for that. What's your opinion on IRBs, and should the county have some looking at maybe something for the legislature to do? Should the city be able to give away the tax things on the IRBs and things?
Well, you need to separate IRBs into two categories. You've got the ones that have a property tax exemption and the ones that don't. And I'm going to expand on my earlier comments on the TIFs and star bonds and include IRBs in it. I want tax relief for everyone, not for the few. I want it for the little guy, not just the big guy. 14th Amendment, we the people, Declaration of Independence, we're all equal under the law. Having elected officials basically saying this little group gets stuff that's not available to everybody else. I'm going to close with this story, John, to kind of as an example, and it's one that Daniel over here at the Eagle probably wouldn't know about, but Kelly knows about it real well. We had a proposal for a TIF district. They wanted to do a grocery store down in Plainview, and said, man, they don't have a grocery store down in that area. Well, it turned out actually there was a little Mexican food mart, there was a Laotian food mart, a Vietnamese food mart, there was a actual regular grocery store on Pawnee, a little bit west of that general area, and it came up for a vote in front of the county commission. The city had approved it. We voted it down 5-0. And that's all. This was when Glenn and Kelly and Tim and Dave and myself. I frankly was stunned. I thought it was going to be a 3-2 vote, one way or the other. Whether it was passed or failed, I wasn't sure, but what people had said prior to the meeting, But here's the rest of the story. The developer got in the paper the next day and just shredded us that we were the north end of a southbound mule. And a couple of years passed, and another developer came up on the scene and not only built a grocery store there, he built a bigger one that had been proposed, and there was no subsidy. Now, to my mind, that incident was the reason why I leave the county commission proud that on the TIF subsidies, for instance, I absolutely opposed. I regret the fact that federal law has created the IRBs that created this environment, but it's a great deal for elected officials because if I can give special favors to a few people, I know who to go back to on election time if I'm giving the special favors. Of course, you got to get elected. But your leadership, thank you.
Karl Peterjohn.
Thank you.
Karl, thank you for your service to the people of Sedgwick County. One of the things that I've noticed and watched over the 8 years that you've been setting policy, that you are a true advocate for individual liberty, private property rights, rule of law, free market capitalism, and limited government. One of the jokes that we like to talk about on the campaign trail that say, well, my vote is not for sale, but I'll rent it occasionally.
That is an actual quote from a U.S. Senator John Breaux, Democrat of Louisiana.
Well, I'm going to tell you that as an observer of Karl and his actions on the county commission, that he was not a part of that group. You're a true man of integrity. We're going to miss your service, although we actually expect greater things now from you, that you're going to be a regular citizen. Welcome.
Thank you, John.
If you'll just indulge me a little bit, I want to say a couple of things about Karl. Karl's a board member of the Pachyderm Club, and we've appreciated his service on there, and you're going to stay there, right? All right. Karl is a great...
If you'll have me. I mean, it's up to you all out there. Not.
We're very glad to have you.
We'll double the pay.
Double the pay, yeah. Karl is a great friend. Any of you guys here that have talked to Karl and know him, he's just a great friend and someone you can talk with readily. He's a gentleman and he's always kind. And he asks good questions, and we have speakers that are tough. You remember Karl's questions. He's always got one that'll stir the subject, right, Karl? Anyway, smart, world-class historian. And I got to tell this is out of place, but here I go. The worst elected official in our county is Betty Arnold on the school board. I have never seen a public official treat people as badly as she does. This man never does anything like this. Is the greatest elected official that we have in Sedgwick County. And he's always up on issues.
John,
thank you. There's a
thank
little
you.
thank you
Appreciate
card
it.
for
Thank
you.
you.
Let's
Appreciate
give
it.
him a standing thank you.